Don't worry, we're gonna make it. We've been looking for clues to find Clay.
Oh, I'm sorry. The clue board? You mean my clue board? That I made? We like the clue board now?
What is he?
What do you think?
I think it looks much cooler on me.
This shit pissed me off. I was so down bad hungover yesterday. Things we do that piss me off each other. Couples challenge. Y'all are so A. The way you do that is piss me off.
Baby, I'm not a Reese Cup kind of bitch. I'm an Almond Joy kind of bitch. I don't eat those.
Okay.
So if I'm still Almond Joy. I don't eat those.
I don't like how everybody is sounding black. Everyone is using AAV. I don't like it at all. It's like everything is ghetto until it's glamorized. Like, especially here in New York City. Y'all remember when the white people used to look at us crazy for hopping the trains? Now they do it. Like, y'all are trying to turn black American culture and lingo and the way we act into this American thing. It's not going to be that. It never will be. It's not. It's like they're trying to erase the black American culture and what we've created and make it all for everyone. No.
I mean, surely that won't happen, right? And these are just the many, many TikToks I agree with that very much represent with my views and opinions on this matter. Disclaimer, I'm sharing my own thoughts on how AAVE is often misused. This is just my personal take on the misuse of AAVE, and this is obviously not meant to speak for all black people. I'm not speaking for anyone but myself. I'm simply sharing my thoughts out of respect as a black creator, and I want to be as informative as possible, and I am open to any discussion down below in the comments as long as that's respectful. I also just want to make it extremely clear that I completely condemn any harassment towards the creators in this video, or any creators mentioned in this video. This is just simply to share my thoughts, and I do not support any harassment whatsoever. Thank you. Now let's get to the video. There's many more other black creators who address this issue, and it's time I do as well and use my platform to speak on this for good. I'm sorry, but this has been a thing that's always been bothering me, and I genuinely need to talk about it. For those who don't know what AAVE is, AAVE stands for African American Vernacular English. It's vocabulary that comes from African American culture that distinguishes it from standard English and makes it stand out. Basically, in simpler terms, Black English, to dumb it down for those who don't understand. Examples of this would be slay, finna, period, hella, gat, go, op, etc. And let me just be super clear, nobody is saying you can't use these words or phrases, but just please use them properly. AAVE has been around for centuries, not just when TikTok/Musical.ly started. I'll play a TikTok video here that gives more informative insight on AAVE and what it is.
AAVE is not TikTok slang. And no matter how much these non-black teenagers pick up on the lingo on TikTok, it still does not negate that African American vernacular English is not TikTok slang. It's giving cultural appropriation. You know, the inappropriate or unacknowledged adoption of an element or elements of one's cultural identity by members of another cultural identity. This could be especially controversial when members of a dominant culture appropriate from minority cultures. And for the people in the back, when it comes to cultural appropriation for things that's in the black community, that's not just a white-black binary. We recognize that all cultures are implicated in the fungibility and cultural appropriation of blackness and black people. Sprinkle some nuance in there for the people on this side. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. And acknowledging that cultural appreciation or cultural exchange is a part of human relations or human history, we can also acknowledge how cultural appropriation has literally hurt the cultural exchange and literally hurt how we're able to share ideas, especially when it comes to exploitation and not giving people their credit. Monetary credit in capital, not just a symbolic tap on the black like I stole these from the blacks over there. Shout out to Elvis Presley.
So apparently people need a video series on AAVE and why it's wrong to be a culture vulture that exploits it for clout. So AAVE is an acronym for African American Vernacular English, and it's a dialect of English that formed in the South amongst enslaved black Americans, was passed down for generations, and moved throughout the country as we did. According to research from Oxford, its formation was first recorded all the way back in 1734. AAVE includes both grammatical structures and vocabulary, commonly mislabeled as slang, that both follow tradition and are constantly evolving. Those of us who grew up exposed to AAVE can intuitively tell when it's spoken right, spoken wrong, and spoken inauthentically. It's like if I moved to Sweden and started speaking Swedish, even for the rest of my life, no matter how hard I tried, native speakers would be able to tell that I didn't grow up speaking Swedish because they would have generations of cultural context that I don't have. And it's the same thing for AAVE, which is why we know when a lot of you guys are faking it or forcing it. 2, for centuries, black people have been oppressed and demeaned for using AAVE. Like in schools, children are told that speaking AAVE isn't proper or legitimate. In 1979, a lawyer successfully sued the Ann Arbor School District because black students are facing academic discrimination because they spoke AAVE. Even more recently, Rachel Gentile, who was giving a key testimony about Trayvon Martin's killing, was speaking in AAVE and subsequently had her testimony ignored and called not credible. According to a Stanford linguist, this was a factor in George Zimmerman's not guilty verdict. Black people in America specifically have been racialized on the idea that we are inherently lazy, poor, uneducated, or criminal. And thus, our use of AAVE has been stigmatized as sloppy, unprofessional, or ignorant. And that's simply not the case for non-Black people who are seen as funny, sensational, or cool when they use it.
I'll also be giving more links down in the description and go more in depth about AAVE because there's a lot to go over with the term itself. Videos like these are uneducated and insensitive, and the videos itself are just completely unbiased. People who typically have these opinions are even Black themselves and just want to continue the cycle of the misusage of Black culture, and they choose to be uneducated and well uninformed, so they spread their harmful opinions. Telling Black people to get a life for telling other non-Black people to stop using AAVE, which was a language that was used to communicate by Black slaves, is fucking absurd to me. What goes through your head when you say shit like this, especially with the brainwash comment? Like, no, Black people aren't brainwashed on Twitter for being upset at the fact that people choose to be ignorant on Black culture and act insensitive towards those who are uneducated. The amount of mainly white people / people who aren't Black and use AAVE genuinely infuriates me. No, it's not brainwash. That is culture. That is our culture that you are doing culture appropriation of without even realizing it. And let me just get this straight. I don't think you're racist if you use AAVE as a non-Black person, depending on intent and usage. However, I do deem you to be reasonably racist if you're using AAVE to look cool as a non-actual Black person. I also believe if you're a non-Black person who blatantly mocks AAVE, then I think you're deemably considered to be racist. If it's like a simple abbreviation and it's a joke with no ill intent and or harmful intent, then it's fine. But if you misuse it on purpose, I believe that you are racist, especially if it's with an intent. If you call AAVE brain rot, you're racist. If you call people who use AAVE chronically online, you're racist. And mind you, me thinking you're racist for these reasons are valid, because AAVE has been rooted deep down to slavery when slaves were in contact with enslaved Black people who were indentured and learning their dialect to communicate with each other and getting enslaved. I've seen so many white and non-Black people make fun of that TS shit pay me off comment, and they always mock it, and it bothers me so badly because you're not Black. You don't get to mock someone misusing our own culture. A lot of you guys don't realize this, but a lot of abbreviations in AAVE culture are AAVE, I fear. And maybe that's because it's used in Black English. And Black English primarily focuses on the language and how it's being typed, especially within this day and age, because of it forming on social media ever since the invention of technology. And yes, this includes before TikTok and before even Musical.ly was a thing, just because it wasn't always like this centuries ago. So they give you guys the right to turn down AAVE and downplay and shrug off its history as brain rot, or say that only half of the culture is relevant when you guys don't even know anything about the culture your own damn self. A lot of you guys don't realize that AAVE goes deeper than it just being common slang. Speaking of which, it makes me genuinely so frustrated how people downplay AAVE and label it as slang as a whole. It's only being labeled as slang because maybe non-Black people see AAVE and downplay it into slang. It was never slang before you guys popularized and TikTokified our culture. And it's still AAVE regardless. Just because it's slang to you guys, it still doesn't mean that culture isn't behind it. People should be aware of the origin of the so-called slang they are using. I genuinely think AAVE should be taught more in schools, especially during Black History Month, due to the culture and historical events that's behind it. The education system is so messed up that people think Black English is just brain rot because of it being labeled as common slang, which also sadly means people, especially Black people, will be called chronically online for their own culture, which isn't true, and that's just erasure. As a Gen Z, I genuinely hate how our own generation, out of all, can be so ignorant towards topics like these. AAVE on TikTok was never an issue up until a few years ago. Just because most words people use in their daily sentences is AAVE, that still doesn't mean it's slang regardless. It's still AAVE. And so no, it's not all just slang. Educate yourselves. Just because a black person doesn't dress like their own stereotype, like how most non-black people want them to dress like, and talks in formal English, meaning they don't use AAVE, does not mean they're whitewashed either. Please stop using and misusing AAVE as a whole if you're not black, especially if you don't even know how to use it. It's embarrassing. I've also seen a lot of people sort of misinform people on AAVE and not spread awareness on it properly, which makes me personally feel as if they're purposefully trying to have others downplay AAVE due to lack of proper informants just because of how badly misinformed they made their awareness. Let me just say, I do appreciate that awareness is being spread anyway, but if you're white / a non-black person, I heavily discourage you from saying what isn't racist since it's not your place to say. However, this is not me discouraging awareness from being spread. I heavily discourage you from saying what is and isn't racist since it's not your place to say. However, this is not me discouraging awareness from being spread, no matter what race you are. Just please be mindful and educative and respectful towards others if you feel the need to be educative. I also beg that you inform others properly on AVE. Here are some examples of how badly informed videos and others can misinterpret AVE as a whole as stupid and not take our culture seriously, so that any of you who want to spread awareness don't fall for these mistakes too. Like, no TikTok uses Uru Sweet Pie. It's not racist to use the word cis or T. And what bothers me the most is that they didn't even bother to put examples, and it makes me wonder if this is a bait account or something, because there's no way this is serious with how misinformed it is. Let me just preface that examples in Rory's TikTok videos like this matter. It's always never like black people saying this. It's always white people speaking up for black people and saying what is and isn't racist, and that is so invalidating and actually racist to be doing. It's not your place to be deciding what is and isn't racist for black people. That is not your culture. You do not get to decide something that is racist for someone's culture. That's weird. I'll be using 4 of these words as an example on screen here, just to give you guys some insight on what the creator meant and should have put in the video to clarify, because I see that a lot of people in their comments are confused, like really confused, and some are even going as far as to call AAVE as a whole stupid. Now, if this example doesn't make sense, I'll also just play another video that's also misinformed. I'm sorry, but what the fuck is this? There are so many things wrong with these 2 videos in itself. This creator might have had good intentions, but associating AAV with a heavy black scent, a stereotype of not only black people but of AAVE, whilst also associating all black people who speak AAV with a black scent is insane to me. Not only is saying all black people must have a black scent to be valid to even speak AAV in order to be a part of their own culture, which is racist in itself, but saying that AAV has to be spoken by a black accent, by a black person, is really fucking racist, considering the fact that there are many other black African Americans out there who don't even have an African accent, such as one myself, but still use AAVE. Also, one thing to point out is that they said only cis depends on the context, when there's a few words that they list in the video that also depend on the context, like the word period. Not everyone using the terms and examples properly and calling Ganglish AAVE while being racist will never fail to amaze me. The sentences the creator provided in part 2 is Ganglish, which is a form of AAVE, but it's not the same thing as AAVE. There's no way to misuse AAVE abbreviation, because that just simply makes no sense, because the abbreviation itself is AAVE. Therefore, there's no real or actual way to misuse AAVE. If you're a black person And that is a very common theory in a lot of videos similar to this that you might stumble across. Also, I don't even know why they brought this up in the first place. Telling a black person they're misusing their culture wrong is weird. Saying that AAVE terms sound dumb to appeal to your audience not only makes the video so much more racist than it already is, but if the creator just so happened to be black and probably is just heavily misinformed and not even realizing they come off as insensitive, why would you invalidate your ancestors like that? Your ancestors went through decades of slavery, couldn't read, couldn't write books, and many, many more. But they still managed to form their own language by learning off of others. Learning the English language itself and using AAV to communicate and to survive is hard enough. Enslaved people didn't have school and were never taught English and still learned it by themselves. English is such a hard language to learn. But for you to sit here and call it dumb when people have used AAVE as a form of communication to survive is disgusting. Especially if those people were your ancestors, your blood, your relatives. Another example in the final video showcasing misinformed examples of AAVE is this video right here, which I will play it in a second. But before I do, I want you to carefully examine this video right here and point out what's wrong with it. Have a really good look at the video.
Get a fresh cut straight out the salon, bitch.
Can't find it? It's right there, over your head. I don't even know if it's worth it to criticize this video because I'm genuinely convinced that it's rage bait. If it's not, then I'm surprised. How the fuck are you going to acknowledge that AAV root has been deep down enough to slavery, yet you're going to refer to enslaved African Americans as fucking servants? While saying stop misusing AAV at the same time at the bottom of the fucking video? I'm sorry, pardon my scripted crash there, but what the actual fuck? Like, it's so disgusting, humiliating, and degrading to see how our ancestors, who had to fight for our rights, went through decades of slavery and punishment just because of their skin color, to be labeled as servants. There's a stronger word for than just dehumanizing, because the absolute fucking nerve to call them servants as if they willingly volunteered to be whipped is not only diminishing to enslaved African Americans, but it's so disrespectful. Enslaved people have their fingers cut off because they defended themselves, or they didn't do something right, or didn't do something quick enough, or do a certain something/task accurately correct enough that they were forced to do against their own will. The nerve to call enslaved African American servants as if this were a job that they consented to when enslaved people were literally born into being slaves. And mind you, OP literally knew how it was about slavery too. I'm not sorry for getting heated. This is just one of the many examples to not inform others about AAVE as. Now, here are some examples that properly explain AAVE.
This is a message for all my white people out there. Why do we need to be appropriating AAVE when we have like so many just gemstones at our disposal? Without further ado, here's a list of my favorite wave or white American vernacular English words and phrases. First of all, we got, what am I, chopped liver? This is just sad. Also, the word glum is just like so blue, so sad. Next we got, what's the big idea? This one is like so funny. I don't understand why people aren't using it. Next we got yes/no sorry, just very like emphatic statement. You mean what you say. And when someone is just trying to bullshit you and feed you lies, that's a bunch of baloney. You're joshing me. Phony baloney. Next we have frick. Self-explanatory. This is a personal favorite of mine, especially with like the pointing to the side. Like, get a load of this guy. Up next, get with the program? Oh my god, that is devastating. These next two wreak absolute havoc in my opinion. Kick rocks and take a long walk off a short pier. Like you're literally telling someone you want them to drown. And we got no more Mr. Nice Guy if you feel like being evil. Newsflash. I mean, I love being condescending. And dude, if someone said this to me, I think I would cry. As if. Or gag me with a spoon. Oh my god, I would have a panic attack. This one is kind of niche. It's like when you're in a grocery store and there's a kid crying or something, it can be like, someone's not a happy camper. It's kind of mean, I don't know. Another personal favorite, Jeez Louise, or a fun little variation you can do, Jesus Louises, kind of alternative.
There's this thing that happens on TikTok where a certain set of people discover a new term, a term and a phrase that's usually AAVE, black people speak, or part of black culture, and they will repeat this comment on every single video. Every single video. Every time I see a video that's like going viral or a video that's funny or a video of someone attractive, they say the same comments. And I think it's people commenting in order to get likes on a comment. But when I say I have never seen people use black speak in the wrong way so much before this app, it's actually concerning. he's a good man, Savannah. I built this brick by brick. You know what? Yeah. Hell yeah. All of these things, they hear black people say on the app, and then they just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And I'm like, you do not know where brick by brick and he's a good man, Savannah came from. Stop using it. So in the video was complaining about somebody telling her to stop saying deadass. And she's like, deadass wasn't created by New Yorkers. We don't own it. And I was like, bruh, deadass is a New York term. Y'all are just using it because you heard it on here. Anyway, if you don't have the personality or the vernacular or the wits to come up with your own comment, stop saying the same shit that you see everybody else say on TikTok. It's annoying. And I see it in every single video. And it's the most liked comment in every video. Stop it. Stop it.
I really need white people to stop using AAVE, okay? Ebonics, whatever the hell y'all want to call it. Stop it, okay? Please just stop, because first of all, y'all don't use it right. 9 times out of 10, 9.8 times out of 10, y'all aren't using it correctly. And then even when you do use it right, it don't sound right. It don't sound right. I just watched a video of this girl. She's talking about some fire. Fire. Girl, it's fire. It's fire. What? Fire. Please stop. Oh my God. I need y'all to go back to saying stuff like swell. You know, that was swell. Or that was smashing. I know that's British, but y'all gotta find some other shit, okay? Because it's killing me.
You are not crashing out. You are throwing a tantrum. Something did not PMO. It got on your last nerve. And you are most certainly not a YN because you are a white suburbanite in 8th grade. I genuinely don't think there has been a generation of white people that more abuses AAVE. White people, y'all have good phrases. Some of them are batting 1,000. Y'all have classics. Use those. My God.
Bad guy nigga, cause I'm moving in the night. Batman nigga, how I feel into the fight. Seeing triple nine, so I gotta get it right. And my mom saw the blunt that I had, she would cry.
You got me looking for attention. You got me looking for attention.
I also feel as if I should mention that a lot of white people don't realize using phrases such as cooked or crashing out is AAV, and I feel as if I should address that as well. No, Olivia, you're not crashing out. You're having a meltdown. Timothy, you're not cooked. You're just in trouble. Words have meaning. There are different words you can use to express yourself instead of overly and constantly misusing words whilst also doing cultural appropriation that come from Black culture. Again, nobody is saying you can't use AAV phrases as a non-Black person. We're just asking for you to stop overly misusing it. If it's a simple phrase or abbreviation here and there, then that's fine. But I promise you, it's not 2021 where primarily white people will call you racist for saying bruh while speaking up for Black people. Anyways, guys, that is it, and that is the end of the video. Thank you for listening, and I'll play some TikToks here and there to end off the video with a good note.
I told my bitch I knew a nigga stopping. I pulled inside the slam, I chucked it up, I feel it.
Depend on our protection.
Your final service. Let your big go through your phone. Oh, hell no, yo,
Feel real comfortable, huh? Get uncomfortable. Block. The fuck out of here. Not.
Do you know them? No. But in the club, we all fam. What? In the club, we all fam. I don't. In the club, we are all family. Are you racist?
Here's a list of my favorite Blacks and struggle moments that I think everybody should see. Starting with this, 2019 finna to be 5 years in a week. Oh, that's not. Pictures of Ariana and Cynthia. This person said, Mother's gonna be 8. Can't wait to see them singing Defying Gravity. You could have just said they're gonna eat up the rose. Nobody will be able to age her. Come on, be effing for real. Why does this tweet have 1,000 likes? 8 who? This sign says, bruh, everyone must have a fruit or vegetable, no cap. It's none of our business if you eat it or not. But it must be on your face. Don't hate the players, hate the game. Alright, Jits. Thanks, cut. You're bussin'. Lunch crew. Is that real? In this iconic tweet, this was back during the pandemic, someone said, coronavirus dies at 132 Fahrenheit. So literally all we have to do is put the weather machine at the temperature for 1 minute. 1 minute. We would all be really musty, but it's literally just a minute. Then boom, pandemic over. And then somebody replied, 132? Girl, we are not Thanksgiving turkeys, and that's on Fahrenheit period. And she replied with a question mark. That's on Fahrenheit period.
See by you, see by you, see by you. I know what it stands for. Do you? See by you, see by you, see by you. I know what it stands for. I'm gonna tell you. Spinach, yams, broccoli, and you. That's right. I mean, don't forget. Means murder. So don't ever go to that big cruelty place. Alright? Thank you.